Okay, welcome all to our latest installment, to our latest symposium, Our Water, Our Future, with two perspectives. This is our latest in our virtual symposium series. And tonight we are fortunate to have two dedicated professionals give us their perspective and bring us their expertise on solving our water crisis. First, we'll join Gabbie Milch, Middle St. John's River Basin Advocacy Coordinator for the St. John's Riverkeeper, who will take us for an amazing journey through our beautiful waterways, down rivers and into springs to see both the beauty and the undeniable pollution in our backyard. Next, we'll be joined by Keith Rieger, Public Service Director of the City of DeLand, who will use his unique professional perspective to demonstrate the technological detail and data that are necessary to address our water issues. Both of our speakers will show us past and future solutions to mitigate the degradation of our precious natural resources. You'll be hearing more about them in a moment. The cost of our water is not simply the water itself, or even the pipes that bring it to us. It is the treatment of the water, both as it comes into our homes and as it leaves. We seldom give the abundance of our water a second thought. We expect it to be safe for use in our homes and in our yards. But there are multiple professionals throughout our communities whose job it is to plan, test, and treat our water so you don't have to give it a second thought. But that is exactly what we're asking you to do tonight. And from this day forward, consider your water. When you're cooking with it, when you're drinking it, and when you're watering your yard with it. And most importantly, think about what your impact is on water quality and quantity, and what changes you can make to both keep our water clean and affordable. Our first speaker is Gabbie Milch. She is the Middle St. John's River Basin Advocacy Coordinator for the St. John's Riverkeeper, a nonprofit organization. Gabbie focuses on water resources protection and clean water in the St. John's River Middle Basin. She activates and advocates for community to engage and learn about the quality and quantity of the river from Orange County to Lake George. She believes that the St. John's River should be safe for kayaking, swimming, and fishing. And clean water is critical for our waterways and aquatic life, and for the health of people. She has worked as an extension agent for the Seminole County IFAS Extension Office as an urban horticulturalist and Florida Friendly Landscape Program agent, and coordinated the Master Gardener program. She has also worked as a stormwater and lakes manager for the City of Maitland and as a clean water conservation coordinator for the City of Ocoee. She has worked in outreach, volunteer coordination, and community education for over 30 years in Central Florida. She attended UF, working on her MS in agricultural education and communications, and graduated from Rollins College, Winter Park, with a BA in environmental studies in 1988. She is an avid kayaker and loves the outdoors. Married with 3 grown children, and she lives near Wekiwa Springs. We join Gabbie Milch, who will take us for an amazing journey through our beautiful waterways to see both the beauty and the pollution in our backyard. The first part of fixing a problem is to know that it exists and to what extent. Gabbie helps us answer these questions and poses some interesting solutions. Gabbie.
Welcome to my presentation. My name is Gabrielle Milch, and I am the St. John's Riverkeeper's Middle Basin Advocacy Coordinator. That's a big mouthful. I am also a paddler and a water person, and have been for most of my life. And I have seen and compared many different waterways. Back in January, I undertook a great adventure and paddled 10 waterways in 10 days and lived to tell the tale. I saw many gators and endured a lot. And I want to thank the Volusia County Water Alliance, my friends, for putting this on tonight. I look at our waters from a riverkeeper's perspective. I am trained regulatory environmental scientist and have over 32 years of experience in water resource management and outreach education in Central Florida. I look at our water's vegetative communities, and they give me the knowledge of how clean the habitat is and how well our ecosystem is doing. And we do need a healthy planet. few things over the years, and I will share with you this evening's conversation. So close your eyes for a minute and pretend that you are in the middle of a forest in your kayak. Now breathe. Now open your eyes. What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? Did you hear the birds? So now I'll give you a chance to escape the concrete jungle in a kayak, and you are even closer to the water. Many people move from Florida from somewhere else and don't really understand our fragile but deadly environment. Welcome to Florida. We have snakes, gators, genetically modified mosquitoes, and in the south we have the Everglades. And we are surrounded by water and vulnerable to tropical storms, prolonged droughts, and massive flooding. Florida is both blessed and cursed. Welcome. Paddling has been my life through COVID. I know that it has benefited me in so many ways. It's gotten me out exercising, got me some stress relief, also made me confident, and also has made me happy and sometimes very sad. So get out there on the water and give it a try. Sharing the waterways is an important aspect of living in Florida. We have all kinds of recreational users, from kayakers, sailboat people, all the way up to the airboats. And when you're sharing the water, and with all the animals too, you definitely have to take into account things like no wake zones or making large waves for people in floating vessels who are paddling. So I just give you some request out there is to please be kind on the water. In the Middle St. Johns River Basin, we have a lot of paddling opportunities. We have some very nice natural areas that have been purchased for conservation, a lot of wonderful state parks and natural lands. And we also have a very urbanized downtown Orlando through Orange, Seminole counties. And then you have Volusia, which is where we are, and there's just water everywhere. And so water is very important to keep clean, especially clean for drinking water. In the urban environment, the water can get quite dirty and low at different times of the year. We can also have high flooding that affects people's homes and their septic tanks and their wells, as well as their wastewater treatment systems discharge into the urban areas. And so in the urban, the non-point source pollution and point source pollution rules need to be worked on, and we need to do a better job in the future. I'm hopeful. When I'm out on the water, I look for things like water levels. I look for clarity and turbidity. And when the water is turbid, you can't see through it, so you know it's not clear. I look for different types of algae blooms. Some algae grows on plants, some is free floating, and some is just takes up a lot of space. I look at the good and the bad plants, and I look for signs for aquatic spraying when you can see a lot of an area is very browned out. I of course look for wildlife and birds, and trash and treasures, and airboats, of course, and outfall pipes where discharge of different things can occur. So those are the big pipes that dump into the waterways. Clean water is so important. In Florida, there are types of water quality grading system. Florida has 6 designated use categories, which are arranged in the order of degree of protection required. Class 1, potable water supplies. There are actually 14 general areas throughout the state, including impoundments and associated tributaries, certain lakes and rivers, and portions of rivers used as drinking water or supplemental irrigation supply. Class 2 waters, shellfish propagation and harvesting, generally coastal waters where shellfish harvesting occurs. And it's hard to believe, but many shellfish harvesting areas, rainwater can be harmful. Oysters and clams need a certain amount of salinity. We then have Class 3, which is a catch-all, which is for fish consumption, recreation, propagation, and maintenance of a healthy, well-balanced fish population. And now we have a new category called Class 3 Limited, where fish consumption advisories, recreational or limited recreation, and the propagation or maintenance of a limited population of fish. Class 4, which is agricultural water supplies, where water quality monitoring is voluntary. Class 5, which is navigation, utility, and industrial use, and we haven't got any of those. All waters in Florida, which the state has jurisdiction, fall into one of those classifications, with mostly designated Class 3 waters. In general, Class 1 waters have most stringent water quality protection, while Class 5 would have the least. However, there are no Class 5 waters at this time, except for maybe the overflow from the phosphate tailing ponds that just occurred in Southwest Florida. We also have a special designated area called Priority Focus Areas. Blue Springs, DeLand, Gemini are a few of the most vulnerable areas for pollution and water level issues. Minimum flows and levels classifications are areas where scientists, engineers, and regulators have looked at the amount of water available after we withdraw for our uses and try to prevent harm or plan to implement recovery plans, or some waters have prevention strategies. This program is a work in progress and needs support and funding by the legislature. We must encourage them to invest in our clean water. We also have human fish consumption advisories in place, and reports are updated every few years. I hear some people who say that it's not their problem because they just fish and they don't eat them, but our birds and other critters do, and the numbers are in decline. Pollutions like heavy metals, other than mercury, which is atmospherically deposed from the burning of coal for our energy, pollutants like dioxins, pesticides, PCBs, and saxotoxins for fecal coliform and untreated wastewater. Check out the Florida Health Department's website for more information. It is important for you to do your part and to protect our water quality and quantity. We were once a state that was the best in water protection, but now we rank lower due to the watering down of our pollution protection laws dealing with stormwater management and permitted discharges like wastewater. We can do something by asking our elected officials to support water management district and FDEP programs once again to protect our waterways better. DeLand, Orange City, and Volusia County have done a great job and heavily invested in Blue Springs watershed to both protect our water quality and our water quantity. They have improved their wastewater treatment facility, have reduced the amount of water being pulled from the ground for irrigation by creating reuse systems, and also supplementing the demand from surface waters that they're using, which has a double-edged sword. They are even opening up a new well field in the north and helping folks with water for new developments. The consequences, however, could be not talking about these issues. It is a great part about the Volusia County Water Alliance work to inform and educate others. Water levels go up and down due to many reasons during the year. Lack of rainfall during a drought or times of high water levels. Did you know the driest month is April? We also have these periodic droughts, which typically have been happening on a 10-year cycle, but this is changing. We use groundwater from our surficial aquifer for drinking, irrigation, agriculture, and industry, and there is a warning that we may be using too much. So we do have water restrictions year-round to protect our water supply. Do you know what your watering days are? It's always a good idea if you have a watering in-ground irrigation system that you don't just set it and forget it. Volusia County Extension Office and the Volusia County website have great information. Please follow the watering restrictions. New installations of turf grass need an establishment time of about 2 weeks, and when you need to stop that supplemental watering. Once the roots are established, you can reduce the watering. It's critical for the health of your lawn. Overwatering leads to fungus and growth in your lawn and lots of dollar weed. Many people come to Florida looking for a greener and warmer lifestyle. We must let them know how things grow here, and during the rainy season, supplemental watering is not always necessary. So please don't set it and forget it, your irrigation system. We need to make the connection that lawn watering leads to impacts to our springs and waterways. From a water quality standpoint, the stuff we put down on our lawns, and from a water quantity standpoint, the amount of water we pull out of the ground. Natural rainfall can recharge the aquifer, but not as fast as we pull the water off. Water loss due to evapotranspiration, watering during daylight hours between 10 and 4, and runoff are two issues to better understand and become more Florida friendly and protect our water resources. I recently heard a statistic that 1,000 people a day are coming to Florida. You can see the strong growth with all the new homes and roadways. Each of these new homes adds to our water issues. I looked up Volusia County's numbers, and at the 2020 census, there was 551,588 people that lived in Volusia County. And that number is projected to grow to over 600,000 by 2025. We all need the bathroom, and so what happens to all that wastewater? Is it treated municipally, or do we have private treatment facilities on each of our homes? There's a lot of things that we put in the water that we can't get out as easily, and one of them is nutrients. And if you have a septic system, please maintain and clean out your system. Also, get an advanced treatment system or upgrade to a wastewater treatment system. And it's certainly worth it in the long run. We have a lot of work that needs to be done to keep our waters clean. Please invest in upgrading our systems. Did you know that 90% of our drinking water comes from groundwater or aquifer? And some of it, where does your water come from? Do you have a private well or city water, or do you just drink bottled water, which still comes from the aquifer in most cases? You have an influence on our water, so please be a good steward. Runoff from the hard surfaces, leaky underground storage tanks, leaky cars, and unmaintained septic systems have a big impact on our water, and it's not easy to reverse. Do you care for your lawn, or do you hire others? You can ask your landscaper if they've ever heard of the green industry's best management practices training. And if not, you can connect them up with the UF ICE extension for classes. Did you know that a commercial landscaper needs a license to fertilize and spray for bugs and fungicides in your yard? It's simple to hire someone to mow, blow, and go, but they need to understand how to protect our water resources. We all have an impact on the water with our modern lifestyles. First step is knowing there's a problem. Did you know that Volusia County, as well as other counties, have fertilizer rules and blackout periods for applying them during the rainy season? Think about it for a minute. Fertilizers in the rainy season may get washed past the root zone and not be available for your plants to feed on. That's a pollution problem and a waste of money. Check out your city and county's website and participate in the programs that the Volusia County Water Alliance is promoting currently to protect our springs, Volusia Blue, Gemini, and DeLand. Take an online class and learn how to be less polluting and use less water and still have a healthy and attractive lawn. In West Volusia, we have some wonderful springs, but to help clean them up and keep the water levels high, it's important to follow best management practices. On the east side of Volusia County, it's more of the salty water and different habitats, and fresh rainwater can even be a pollutant loading in those areas. We have 5 water management districts in our state, and we live in the St. Johns River Water Management District, which is 18 counties. We are almost in the middle of the watershed. The river is about 310 miles and flows north. It starts in the south in lakes and marshes and flows through. We live in District 5 of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection area, and local permits get permits from these agencies to supply us with water and our wastewater treatment. There are also private industry who get permits from these agencies as well. These permits can be difficult and expensive to get and need to be maintained, but are in the big picture a look of what we're doing across political and physical boundaries. The DEP and the Water Management District rules are modified and have helped us to reduce the cost of water and to have long-term consequences of pollution and overconsumption addressed. It's a fine balance to get the water and the plumbing correct. So what can you do to help? Here are a few things you can do. Becoming aware is so important, and then modifying your behavior is critical. I have been working on this field for over 30 years and am saddened by the state of our water at times. If you are young and just moved here, everything may look fine, but we can do so much better. I'm sure many of you have visited Volusia Blue Springs and paddled on the spring run out to the St. Johns River and know the beauty and the importance of those areas for the manatees and the fish that swim up into the spring boil and need that 72-degree water constantly coming out of the aquifer to protect them in the cold and also as a refuge from boats on the river as well. Take a chance. Get out and visit Blue Springs. Blue Springs has a pollution prevention plan. It's called a BMAP, a Basin Management Action Plan, which is a 20-year plan to reduce pollution and help water levels in the springs. Google Blue Springs BMAP on the computer. DeLand Springs and Gemini Springs have the same. Take a little time, read up on the issues, and please do things better for us and clean water. We need your support. Gemini Spring is an amazing asset to our community for recreation. I once swam in the springs, but it's not allowed today. Water quality in the spring coming out is impacted by the watershed above, which is the City of DeLand, which they are working hard to upgrade their systems from discharging to the springs. You can make a difference if you live in the Gemini Spring, Paget Creek, and DeBerry Bayou area. There's a restoration plan. There's a wonderful group of people called the Gemini Springs Alliance. Check them out online and volunteer. You too can help protect our springs. I visited DeLand Springs back in the 80s and 90s and spent lots of time in the water there, enjoying the lovely weather and wonderful water quality. It's amazing how you go back some 40 years later and see the differences in the area. I know that DeLand Springs has had a problem with nutrients from agricultural lands as well as septic tanks in the area. And there's a group of dedicated folks working on educating the community and trying to work on their basin management action plan. If you get a chance, get out there to DeLand Springs and get yourself some of those wonderful pancakes from that historic grist mill and enjoy the day. You can even take a paddle out on Lake Woodruff from that area, and it's got some wonderful plants and animals that you can enjoy. Green Springs is a wonderful park located in Enterprise, Florida, right off of Lake Monroe in the St. Johns River. It's one of the most interesting springs, I think, that we have to deal with in Volusia County. And if you go a bit upstream on the hiking trails there, you can see some wonderful little Florida waterfalls. It has some wonderful walking trails, biking trails, and is hooked on to the Springs to Springs Trail in Volusia County. Check it out. It's a great place. Seems relatively good water quality wise, but we can always improve with our septic tanks, fertilization, and other water conserving important aspects of turning off your irrigation, especially during the rainy season. Our challenges are great. We must help pay our way to clean water for drinking and for recreation, for nature, and for our yards, for agriculture, and for the wide open spaces. Water is very important. What are you willing to pay or change in your life? Private property rights doesn't include the water beneath your feet. A permitted water user, a legal water user, has certain protections that you as an individual don't have. Is that reasonable? Is it cost effective? Should water pollution cleanup be voluntary or mandatory? Many challenges we face for future generations. We must develop in a more sustainable and thoughtful manner than we are today, in my opinion. We've talked about a lot of problems today, and also we have some solutions for you. You too can participate by conserving irrigation water, improving awareness of your neighbors, families, and friends. You can try to use the reuse water if available. If you have a septic system, to hook up to a wastewater treatment plant or upgrade your septic system to a higher nutrient treatment system. Reducing stormwater runoff from your yards by sweeping up fertilizer, leaves, and debris and not washing them down the storm drain are all effective things that you can manage your pollution. Thank you. I have been a clean water advocate or educator for most of my career. Here I am out on my 10-day paddle challenge with a group of conservationists and preservationists thinking and talking about the importance of clean water. This is Juniper Run in the middle of the Ocala Forest, where there's land use is not as polluting as in our urban areas. Become a clean water advocate. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your elected officials. Please write letters when asked. We appreciate all your help. You can always join the St. Johns Riverkeeper organization and help us help the water. Who is the St. Johns Riverkeeper? Her name is Lisa Reineman, And our mission is to be an independent voice, which she is, that defends, advocates, and activates others to restore the St. Johns River. She's also a member of the Waterkeepers Alliance of the United States and throughout the world. So please check out our website and check out the Waterkeeper Alliance website as well. Please become a member, shop at our online store, help support the work of the St. Johns Riverkeeper, and protect the river, the St. Johns River, a lovely 310-mile northernly flowing waterway that has made Central Florida and Florida what it is today. Thank you for listening to me tonight, and hopefully you'll adopt some of the practices we spoke about today. You can get in contact with me at Gabbie@stjohnsriverkeeper.org or give me a call if you'd like a presentation in the future. I appreciate the Volusia County Water Alliance for putting this together, and I will take any questions at this time. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Gabbie. That was a great presentation, very comprehensive. And I have a question for you from it's a couple of technical questions first. from David Bottomley, and this is in the chat box. I don't know if you saw it. So FWC aquatic vegetation control problem adds to the toxic sediment. Add to it, the herbicides in themselves are toxic. AV is a food source before the FWC AV control problem. Is there any way to address that? So I think what he's saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Gabbie, he's saying that the spraying to kill the weeds around the edges of the ponds is itself detrimental and creates more, the herbicides create more toxic sediment that just settles to the bottom and isn't good for the water body. Is there a solution to that?
In a lot of areas, I just got a letter back I wrote to the Seminole County about Lake Jessup. I was out paddling and they were spraying, and I asked if there was a way they could mechanically harvest it instead of spraying, and with our manatees and the food sources that are required for some of them. Aquatic weed spraying, was started for navigational purposes, but I think the budgets are so large right now, it's difficult to get away from spraying. People believe there's a big problem, but I definitely want to work on that in the future. And the sediments that, there is a barge that's coming along in some areas. They have barges that are going to be sucking up some of those nutrients and putting those back into some of the upland areas and things, but that in itself could be a problem with runoff too. So that's a big one to work on.
Yeah. And another big one for you here is the amount of people coming to Florida, 1,000 coming in, and there are as many leaving, arguably, but we still need to manage, this is also from David, need to manage water resources. Most counties have fertilizer ordinances, but they're really toothless, and enforcement, is always the problem. It's little to none. So how do we solve that problem? If the ordinances aren't really being enforced, they're posted, but there's no real detriment.
Well, I think a lot of the fertilizer ordinances were put in for educational purposes, and they weren't meant to be, to be penalized, penalizing people with fines and such. And some counties have classes you can take to educate yourself, and once you fertilize properly, you could reduce it. But commercials, you hear them all the time on the television about, go ahead and feed your lawn. And it's, I wish that we as clean water advocates could have enough money to do commercials to counterbalance some of those and that, because, fertilizing once a year or twice a year is perfectly acceptable. But, if you have a maintenance company, they can fertilize every month, or they come out and put something down every month, even during some of the blackout season. So we've got some work to do on fertilizer ordinances, but we've got some, that people are working hard. The staffs are educating people all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have another one for you. If you had a wish list, what would your first 3 wishes be to protect our waters?
My first wish would be that we could reduce our nutrient loadings to our waterways. And my second one would be that we would stop watering or irrigating our lawns so much and reduce the impacts to that. And I wish that there was some area that that we can build on success and just keep going. So that's a hard one.
Right. And one last quick one, and then we're going to move on to Keith. And Keith, any of these questions, we're going to do a Q&A after Keith does his presentation. So any of these questions that you would like to talk to Keith, we can do that at the end too. And then, we can open it up and Gabbie can jump back into it, if that's okay with you all. What do you think a sustainable community would look like, Gabbie? And how do you see us providing water for all the people coming to Florida? Speaking of the people coming in.
Well, a sustainable future would be one where we would reduce our impacts to our natural systems and with our wastewater, and we're working on that, and also a little less or a lot less polluting with, industry. I think that having a sustainable landscape where we have some expectations of our landscapes that maybe not be so realistic. When people come to Florida, we kind of compare our yards, some people do, to Disney World, where we could maybe compare it more to a natural area. Also, there was one, what was the end part of that? I had something that popped out of my head, sorry.
Let me find it. Oh, how do you see us providing water for all the people who are coming in?
Well, I think having conversations like we're having tonight and talking about it, because the average person uses 50% of their water is the average. Of course, they use on irrigation. And I think we need to just, the average person maybe uses more water. And I think that Keith's going to address the per person usage.
Right.
And I would hope that I try to use, under 70 gallons a day, with showering and all of the things that we do. So just hope we could reduce our water usage.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And next we are going to move on to Keith. There we go. Great. Keith Rieger, PE, is the Public Service Director for the City of DeLand and has worked for the city for 27 years. Previously, he was a consulting engineer, including civil, utility, and environmental engineering, for the city of Atlanta, Georgia, for 14 years. As a professional engineer, Keith was responsible for construction of more than 150 governmental capital projects, as well as maintenance, operations, and planning for public infrastructure for local governments in Florida and Georgia. He serves as DeLand's Director of Public Services in responsible charge of public works, stormwater, utilities, engineering, and airport divisions. He has a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology, a Bachelor's in Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Florida. For our webinar tonight, Keith will be providing us with a unique perspective, that of a public utility professional, and the challenges, solutions, and opportunities that informs. Keith will be going into details of what these water quality and water quantity challenges mean for you and me and the futures of our communities, what causes water degradation, and what cities and their water managers are doing to address that. Keith.
This portion of the Our Water, Our Future presentation focuses on public utility challenges, solutions, and opportunities. During the next few minutes, I plan to discuss a utility manager's perspective as it relates to water in our area, anticipated growth and demands, water quantity challenges, water quality challenges, utility projects and initiatives, project costs and future rate implications, and finally, solutions and opportunities. As a public utility manager in West Volusia, there are a number of things that keep me awake at night. One is increased water demand, obviously due to growth. That also implies more wastewater to treat and dispose. We try to be good stewards of the environment, so we look at things like wetland impacts, sustainable discharge, residuals disposal from our treatment facilities. We need to make sure that we have sufficient supply and safe drinking water. We need to be concerned with renewal of aging infrastructure, regulatory compliance, and very importantly, we have to provide affordable service to our ratepayers and citizens, and we have to make sure that the public understands the value of water. Even though growth occurs in fits and starts, anticipating growth and demands is really essential for utility managers. Volusia County's population is approximately 600,000 at the present time, and the annual rate of growth is about 1.5% per year. In 2019, the combined potable water demand for the West Volusia utilities, that's Orange City, Deltona, DeLand, and the County of Volusia, was about 21 million gallons per day. Projected demand in 2024 is about 25 million gallons per day, and in 2035 about 29. At present, there are 6 major municipal wastewater treatment plants in West Volusia. In addition, there are lots of septic tanks, more than 26,000 on lots smaller than 1 acre in the Blue Spring primary focus area. Let's introduce some terms and acronyms that relate to the regulation of water in our area. First is the MFL, or minimum flows and limits, which are limits beyond which further withdrawal from the aquifer or from surface water would be significantly harmful to the water resources. Next would be consumptive use permits. These are permits that are issued by the St. Johns River Water Management District or other districts elsewhere in the state, which define the maximum annual and daily withdrawals allowed from either the aquifer or surface waters. Next are the Basin Management Action Plans, or BMAPs, and this is basically a plan or a master plan, a list of projects which, if implemented, will provide compliance with the target pollution limit. Clearly a quality-related, water quality-related term. And finally, the TMDLs, or total maximum daily loads, and this is the concentration or pounds of pollutants introduced on a daily basis or an annual basis, which are considered to be, beyond which is considered to be harmful. And so for Blue Spring, they've established, for example, a nitrate nitrogen limit of 0.35 milligrams per liter, which is considerably lower than the current concentrations, about a 45% reduction overall loading required. So to recap, water quantity challenges are addressed by the minimum flows and levels, the MFLs, and also consumptive use permitting. And the water quality challenges are addressed by the total maximum daily load and BMAP concepts and regulations. One of the more interesting and frankly unique MFLs, or minimum flows required for spring in the state of Florida, involves Volusia Blue Spring right here in Volusia County. This is because the Volusia Blue feeds the spring run, which is the cold water refuge for the manatees, the West Indian manatees. And when the regulations were developed in the early 2000s, it was determined that an increased population of manatees would need a longer spring run, or a longer warm spring run, and that an increasing amount of flow from the spring would keep that spring run warm. And so a graduated MFL was put in place, and it's almost fully implemented. By 2024. The spring flow of 157 CFS will need to be implemented. And just to give you an idea how much flow that is, 1 cubic feet per second equals about 0.65 million gallons a day. 157 cubic feet per second equals over 100 million gallons per day. And this is important because, as I mentioned earlier, the combined demand of West Volusia is on the order of 20 to 25 million gallons per day of water. It does not all come out of the spring run, and even if all the wells were turned off, it would not equate to 25 million gallons per day of additional flow. It would only be a small part of that, because the groundwater withdrawal doesn't directly affect the spring, but it does reduce the water table elevation and the flow to the spring to some extent. So, a 1 million gallon per day reduction in pumping probably equals 0.1 million gallons per day reduction in flow from the spring. Nonetheless, the municipal pumping and pumping from all wells in the Florida aquifer in this region around the springs does impact the spring flow. On the water quality side, as I mentioned, TMDLs and BMAPs are the performance measures, if you will, that we go by to make sure that we have good quality, or try to attempt to get good quality in our streams and surface waters. These parameters are regulated by both the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the U.S. EPA. As I may have mentioned, the nitrate reduction required for Blue Spring is 45%, and the nitrate limit, the TMDL, or total maximum daily load, is 0.35 milligrams per liter. I would note that although nitrate is the primary constituent that's sampled and measured, that the nitrate is an indicator parameter for other contaminants of concern, and it's assumed right, wrong, or indifferent, that if the nitrate concentration is reduced, then other parameters like phosphorus and organic material and so forth are similarly reduced due to the higher levels of treatment provided. Scientists and regulators and utility providers frequently use the term spring shed or spring basin to define the area that influences both the quality and quantity of water in a given spring. For Blue Spring, the spring shed basin is shown or depicted on this map with the dotted line, and basically the way that line was drawn was geologists used the concept that a drop of water falling on the ground would have a travel time to the spring of 100 years or less. So a drop of water that falls into land may take 90 or 100 years to actually get to Blue Spring. This is all very theoretical. It assumes a kind of a homogeneous aquifer. As we know, the aquifer varies from place to place in density, and the amount of flow that can pass through it changes. But generally, if there's a well that withdraws water outside the 100-year capture zone, or something that introduces contaminants outside there, we're not too worried about it in the Blue Spring Basin. Now, it obviously has concern to the bodies of water closer to the discharge or withdrawal. Contamination of our groundwater, our springs, and our surface water comes from a number of sources, and it varies by land use. In some areas, the predominant contaminant is, for example, septic tanks, and for Volusia Blue, the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, determined that the septic systems were responsible for about 54% of the contamination in the spring. Wastewater treatment plants, for example, account for about 8% of the contamination. Wastewater plant reuse, about 4%. Urban turf grass and fertilizer, about 22%. As I mentioned, this varies. If you note, for Gemini Springs, for example, septic systems and fertilizer are about equal. And in DeLeon Springs, fertilizer is the predominant form of contamination, probably followed by fertilizers and, or urban turf grass, fertilizer, and septic contamination. Solutions to some of these problems from a municipal government standpoint include reducing the amount of water that's used by whatever methods are possible. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but conservation is certainly important. Demand management, which makes people use less water because of the cost of water. Improving citizen awareness through education are all important tools that we use. We also promote the use of lower quality water for irrigation, in most cases reclaimed water. Enhanced groundwater recharge by putting water in ribs, rapid infiltration basins, and other things of that nature. And we try to develop alternative water supplies that are farther away from the springs and surface waters in question, such that they have less impact. As far as the water quality issues, we've certainly tried to upgrade our wastewater treatment plants to remove the maximum amount of nutrients we can. We expand our sewer service areas to eliminate septic tanks, and we try to reduce stormwater nutrients from fertilizer, leaves, and debris. Regarding conservation, we know that this is really only a partial solution to reducing our deficit. Conservation efforts need to focus on outdoor use because upwards of 40% of system demand is attributed to irrigation. In some cases, it's even more, up to 60%. Conservation is effective only if it's implemented with a significant focus. We need to change our land development regulations and not require as much landscaping that needs to be irrigated, minimize irrigated turf, and so forth. And then finally, conservation requires a very significant investment, both in terms of education and frankly, enforcement. But it is less costly than treating surface water, desalination, or some of the other methods. Demand management has been very effective in reducing the amount of water that is consumed by the public. And what I mean by demand management is that we have a system in virtually all of our municipal government rates in West Volusia, where the more water that a customer uses, the more they pay per 1,000 gallons. The unit rate increases. So this is an example for DeLand. for a residence that uses a relatively small amount of water, a lifeline amount, if you will, just for drinking and bathing and washing clothes, the rate's only $2.30 per 1,000 gallons. So, it is a very affordable. However, this rate goes up, and as customers use more and more water, primarily for irrigation or swimming pools or what have you, that rate goes all the way up to $7.14 per 1,000 gallons. And those are the customers that get water bills in the hundreds of dollars. Some of them don't care, but a lot of people do. They realize they're making a purchasing decision when they buy water. Similarly, we have a block rate structure for reclaimed water. That rate's a little less, but it increases a little bit every year, and the value of reclaimed water is becoming closer to that of potable water. Utility suppliers in West Volusia participate in the Save Our Springs and Rivers initiative, which addresses the issues in Volusia Blue Spring BMAP. This is a 3-year outreach and education program funded by the EPA, and it focuses on reduction of septic tank nutrient discharge, fertilizer contamination, and groundwater pollution. And there's the link there to www.greenvolusia.org. And of course, we're very pleased to participate with the Volusia Water Alliance in this symposium series, one of which is part of this program is part of. The Alliance has also put out a homeowner's guide, a yard sign that talks about the water pledge. We have a water symposium that during non-COVID times we'll be able to meet in person and have some talks and stuff like this. The Water Festival, which is an outdoor fun exhibit in downtown DeLand, and you can find out more about this by contacting VolusiaWater.org. As mentioned, a lot of pollution that occurs in our springs and surface water, rivers, and so forth is the result of septic tank discharge. And the purpose of this slide is just to illustrate what happens in a septic tank. Obviously, the flow goes to literally a tank, and then there's some treatment that occurs in that tank due to bacterial decomposition, and the water is discharged into the soil through a drain field and flows into the groundwater. Septic tanks are pretty good at protecting public health, reducing contamination of some organic constituents, but don't do a good job of removing nutrients. Wastewater treatment plants are capable of reducing contaminants, both organic and nutrients, to much lower levels than septic tanks. For this reason, it's desirable to have more flow go to the wastewater treatment plants and have less septic tanks out there, and it reduces the overall loading. There are more than 50,000 septic tanks in Volusia County, and frankly, more are being permitted every day. A lot of them are in West Volusia, particularly close to Gemini Springs, close to Blue Spring, in the Deltona area, in Orange City, DeLand, and in the unincorporated areas. Once septic tanks are installed, it's costly and difficult to eliminate them. Retrofitting neighborhoods that have septic tanks so that they're placed on municipal sewer costs $15,000 to $20,000 per residence. There are ways to upgrade septic tanks and drain fields. The cost for that is pretty high, and there is an annual maintenance and operations cost. Involved in that program is the actual construction of the sewers, but beyond that, there's the physical connection that has to be done by a plumber, abandoning the septic tank, and then the payment of sewer impact fees to the receiving utility and monthly sewer charges. And this is complicated by the fact that many septic tank owners have low to moderate income and really just can't afford to participate in the cost. Nonetheless, as grant funding and funding from municipal governments becomes available, sewer retrofit projects are undertaken. In DeLand, for example, we have the Spring Hill area, an area that was historically underserved, where we have installed a number of gravity sewer lines, improved the water system, and obtained some grants to help low and moderate income residents connect to the sanitary sewer. These are some photographs of some of that construction. You can see that the deep holes that need to be dug for the sewers and install the sewer lines is very extensive, and you can imagine some project like this coming down your street. It's a costly and disruptive undertaking. So as time goes by, our utilities will need to construct additional water production and treatment capacity to provide more quantity of water for their customers. And they'll have to construct additional sewage treatment plant capacity and upgrade the plants to make sure we get the maximum amount of nutrient removal that's achievable. Have to expand distribution of reclaimed water, and we'll have to participate in septic to sewer conversion. Funding for these projects comes from several sources. Impact fees, that's the fees that we charge developers as they build their new homes, and of course these are passed on directly to the buyers, to the new homeowners. User rates, which we charge all the customers that use the system, and grants, and hopefully in the future, the grants will be available due to some of these infrastructure programs and continuation of existing programs. In DeLand, most of the projected costs that we have, which total $30 to $40 million, have been incorporated in the current rate structure. And we've anticipated these costs and have tried to reserve some funds so that there's not a big rate shock. This may vary in other jurisdictions, however. So what are some opportunities? First, I think we need to raise public awareness of the issues and encourage and support infrastructure investment, and also the purchase of environmentally sensitive lands. We all need to support conservation and Florida-friendly gardening. We need to think big in terms of septic tank conversion, upgrading our wastewater treatment plants, developing new sustainable water supplies. And finally, we need to position our communities to receive the maximum grants from state and federal sources as they become available. And in many cases, this means being ready to put some skin in the game. In other words, provide some local matches so that we can get as many grants as we can. So as far as the bottom line, I'll tell you that West Volusia Utilities are trying to provide the best possible environmental stewardship that they can, and at the same time be good stewards of our taxpayers and ratepayers' limited financial resources. Needed improvements are very costly, and so we need all the help we can get to educate the public so they support state and federal funding and supply necessary local matching funds. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Keith. That was wonderful. Very comprehensive. I have a couple of questions here, and feel free. I have one in the Q&A. Let me find one here. Okay. Most of my neighbors are unaware of the water issues here in Volusia County. How can the county teach new residents how to live more environmentally?
Well, I think, the Volusia Water Alliance is attempting to do just that, as is the Audubon Society and all the, Save the Manatee Club and Riverkeeper and the county themselves and the utilities are trying to get the word out that, water shouldn't be taken for granted, and we as utility managers always say when we do our job perfectly, nobody notices, but let that water go off for 5 minutes in the house and, it becomes a crisis. So, I guess we all have to do all we can do to let people know. And I'll say too that, from my own personal experience and, raising children and grandchildren, getting people outside, kind of like Gabbie has alluded to, out in the river, out in the, at the springs, out in the woods, on the bike trails, if you don't get out into nature, you don't appreciate nature. And so we need to try to encourage programs. I mean, Volusia County was excellent in supporting the ECHO extension and those projects, and so that'll help get people outside. COVID has obviously pushed everybody back a lot, but hopefully in the near future that'll change again. And so promoting outdoor activities, promoting the spring festivals, the Manatee Festival, things like that, even as crowded as it is and distasteful to people who like to be alone in the woods, that's a good way to educate the public and get them an appreciation of the natural resources we have.
Right. Very good point. Very good point. So many of your colleagues, I would imagine many of your colleagues throughout the cities in Volusia County, I imagine have the same concerns as yours. I'm sure you have, meetings about such. What kind of cutting edge technologies, both green and gray infrastructure, are being used in DeLand and elsewhere?
Well, one of the goals that we all share is to upgrade all of our wastewater treatment facilities to advanced wastewater treatment, and that means nutrient removal to the maximum practical level. So we're reducing the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. It takes a little while and it's very expensive. But as we add capacity, as we renew our treatment facilities, they are all being brought up to that standard. So that's important that, you know, that 8% that we showed in that pie graph gets reduced further so that, you know, the municipal utilities are not a major source of groundwater pollution. So that's one thing that we're doing. We are participating in public education. You know, there's a portion of all utility budgets that are dedicated to educational programs. You know, so we try to make the public aware to the extent that we can. So and beyond that, there's more to be done, and we're always looking at improvements. A couple of things. One is we've looked at a project collectively near Blue Spring, which is the old Barra pit along West French Avenue that is pretty much mined out. We looked at the possibility of using that as a place to increase groundwater recharge. Unfortunately, the recharge capability of that has proven to be less than we anticipated. However, I think probably the county and Orange City may move forward with some projects to use that as kind of a demonstration area and recharge to some extent, a smaller extent than initially thought. But that's an example of, you know, the utilities invested money to explore that option and to study it, have some consultants, geologists and such work on it. So we're looking at things like that. I know the Riverkeeper and others have questioned the treatment of sludge and what we do with our wastewater residuals. And we have these wonderful wastewater treatment plants and we take a lot of the contaminants out, but they do have byproducts, and one of which is sludge. And so this material has been treated. It's not horribly odorous or doesn't attract, you know, lots of flies and stuff like that. However, it does still contain some nutrients. And until fairly recently, a lot of this material was disposed on land, just land spread under certain agricultural use permits. And provided it wasn't, you know, too many pounds of it weren't applied to a given acre per year, it was considered an acceptable practice. This is changing now that sludge is being more highly treated, but it still represents a disposal problem. So that's something I see in the future that the utilities need to address collectively to do that in a little more environmentally sustainable manner. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I guess the bottom line is that we're doing what we can. We really need to try to foster additional grant money so that we can, you know, some of these projects are very, very expensive, you know, tens and tens of millions of dollars. And, you know, we are a county that doesn't have, you know, tremendous financial resources. So we have to, you know, kind of bootstrap our way into these projects.
Right. And that we have another question here. And this is from Diane. My home is 6 years old in unincorporated Volusia. We had to pay for septic lines to be installed when our road was paved, but there's no way for this road to hook up to public septic. I think she means public sewer. Mm-hmm. When the county addresses their responsibility to provide, when will the county address their responsibility to provide access to public sewer systems? I paid for something that I have no hope to use. This is in the Q&A. I think I'm reading it correctly. Because it would be public, she's saying public septic, but it's public, it would be public sewer. And because all septics are private.
I'll say this, that, you know, and I can't speak for the county. I know Mike Ulrich, the county utility director, is in the audience. I don't know if there's any way for him to respond directly, but I'll try to do the best I can. And that is that, you know, when new developments go in, it is always ideal to have the thought that in the future they could be connected to sanitary sewer, even if it's not practical initially. And so in DeLand, for example, we've activated neighborhoods 10, 15 years after they were built out because, you know, sewer became available due to whatever reason. The lines were run out that way. You know, it was affordable at that time. Other developments came in that were, you know, made connections closer and so forth. So it is, I wouldn't give up hope that it's not going to happen without knowing exactly where it is and without some input from the county. I couldn't give you an exact date. I'm sorry, but maybe you could, maybe Mike could, you know, respond to that at some point or get back with me, and it'd be helpful to know exactly where this is.
And any questions we can't answer tonight, we're happy to put that up on our website and answer to any of those questions. So that's fine. Talking about money, and money is the solution to the septic problem. You talked about positioning our communities and putting local matches in. There, in this most recent legislative session, there was quite a lot of money coming because of the money that was coming from the federal government for the COVID relief. Out of this session, we had 300 million for Florida wildlife protection, which would go to land conservation, which is what you were talking about. 100 million from LATF to Florida Forever, and 500 million for septic to sewer programs. I'm curious as to, and if you know, how we access this money. What piece of the pie does Volusia County get from that 500 million for septic to sewer? Because arguably we have all of these priority focus areas that are in dire need of it.
And I don't have an exact number. However, typically these funds are distributed through either the Department of Environmental Protection or the St. Johns River Water Management District, or both. And it's typically a grant program where application needs to be made by the utilities, and they're ranked based on priorities of different criteria that those regulatory agencies establish. Typically, the pounds of nitrogen loading, for example, that are eliminated by putting the project in, that kind of thing. We've been pretty successful in DeLand and elsewhere in Volusia County in applying for and receiving those grants, but there has to be a local match and there has to be a local initiative to take that money down. And it takes a while. It doesn't happen, in a year. It takes several years to get that in place. So in DeLand, we found it was helpful to actually get the projects designed on a speculative basis, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases for survey and engineering design and permitting, and then have the plans kind of on the shelf ready to go, shovel ready, if you will, and then apply. And then, we've ranked higher priority. Once it's done, typically the funds are 50%, something like that, of the cost, and the remaining cost has to be borne by the local ratepayers or somebody like that. And then you have to convince the customers to hook up, and they don't always want to, particularly if they're low to moderate income. So it's not that straightforward. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not as easy to take it down and make it happen as it might sound. Nonetheless, I think it's the responsibility of all the governments, the local governments, to try to work down the backlog, if you will, of these septic tanks on a priority basis. I'll also say, and again, I'm probably preaching to the choir, that stopping the proliferation of additional septic tanks is really important. To stop the hemorrhaging. If you can only reduce them by 2 or 3% per year, and you're building new ones at 2 or 3% per year, you can see it's a pretty tough battle.
Right. I have one last question. I know we're a little bit over tonight, but do you think there will come a time when they won't permit water for all the subdivisions going in? Is there a breaking point where you will say we don't have any more water?
As a utility engineer, my job is not to say we don't have any more water. My job is to say, if you want more water, this is what we have to do and what it'll cost. Because I'm an engineer, and the water that we have that's available now is relatively inexpensive, but we're going to run out of the inexpensive water and have to go to the more expensive water. And and the current ratepayers are not going to want to pay more for development, obviously, and so that becomes a political issue. So we can provide more water. We can desalinate seawater. We can get water from the river. We can capture rainwater and treat it to levels that are necessary, but it gets more expensive. I've noted with interest in the newspaper, read the newspaper about Deltona wanting to have a moratorium. I believe it was Deltona, on planned unit developments, which are the more densely populated new subdivisions. And so I think you're starting to see in some jurisdictions, at least, some pushback to the numbers of units that are coming to Volusia County. We're a very desirable place to live. We have a lot of open space that can be developed into residential subdivisions at profit to the landowners, and they have certain certain rights to their property. And so it's a difficult question from that perspective, but to answer your question, yes.
Okay, and Mike has answered the previous question, Mike Ulrich from DeBerry. The only area I'm aware of where some sewer lines were installed was 15 to 20 years ago on 2 streets in the North Peninsula area north of Ormond Beach. Please call Mike Ulrich if you have any questions, and his phone number is 386-943-7027. So with that, I am going to thank you all so much for attending tonight. It's so great that so many of you joined us tonight. And of course, thank you to Keith and Gabbie for your unique perspectives and your expertise and your time that went into doing this. This webinar will be available, as we said before, on the West Volusia Audubon channel on YouTube, and those for those of you who want to reference back to some of this information, or for those who for friends who are unable to attend. And we also want to let you know to go to our website, volusiawater.org, where you will find you can get a copy of our homeowners guide or a yard sign, and the yard signs are going like hotcakes, so that's great. And so please email volusiawater@gmail.com for yard signs and hard copies of the homeowners guide. And I also want to let you know that we have a symposium, a live in-person symposium, tentatively scheduled for Friday, October 29th at the Sanborn Center in DeLand. Many thanks to the folks in DeLand and for Keith for helping us out with that. And with that, I would like to thank you all for attending so much, and have a good evening. Thank you.